Welcome to my workbench. This is a review of a QAV 180 frame. This is a clone I got off eBay, and I'm going to take you through some of the things I like about its flying characteristics. I'll talk you through some of the components that I've put in this, and lastly leave you with some guidance on whether or not a 180 frame may work for you. Now for this guy, I have to say the flight characteristics are much more tame than my full 5-inch blade 4S full-size copter. And the purpose behind that's a bit intentional. I'm only flying this on 3S, and I like the fact that it flies more like a bird than, for example, like a dragonfly or a bug. Your flight approach is just different with this because of the lack of power. You can still, thrust out of stuff if you need to bail, but for the most part, this is far more linear, flying more like a bird, picking your lines. This also is very, very nice in tight quarters. I can spin around trees, I can stick my nose through tight spaces that I would not feel comfortable with on a larger copter. So overall, I've really liked the flight characteristics. One thing I will show you here, and let me line up the props. If you look at this straight on, and hopefully this is showing up in the camera, you'll see that this is actually a squashed X. The space from here to here is actually shorter than the space across, as compared to a true X, where you have roughly the same space on all your motors. Now how does this translate? What I feel is initially the pitch was a little tough to tune. I've had to put a little bit higher P gains on my pitch access and D gains on my pitch access to account for the fact that when you're flying at this angle, your rear motors are so close to your front motors, I believe there's a little bit of dirty air on there. But that's fairly minor, it's not a big deal. Now as far as the actual components I've used some different items on here, and probably the first thing you notice is the cool prism tape that I have on the camera mount. I've also got some racing stripes down the side. Now while I admit this is 90% bling just for my enjoyment, there is some practicality if you're doing line of sight flying, and this helps with orientation. This stuff's called prism tape. I got it on eBay for about 12 bucks for a variety pack, and it's used for making fishing lures. So it's kind of fun if you want to bling up your copter or add just a little bit of visual to help you with orientation. Now as far as the real components go, first thing, I have some recycled motors here. These are King Kong 2204 2300 kV. They're a little big for this copter. I would recommend actually an 1806 size motor to shed some weight. However, I had these laying around. They're super smooth. I really like these motors, so I'm happy with the performance despite the additional weight. Now the two real new things I used are a 4-in-1 ESC. So down at the bottom I've got a 20 amp all-in-one ESC, and then above that on the flight controller I'm using a Lux version 1. Now my original goal was to have a really small stack in here, run the power directly from the 4-in-1 ESC to the Lux, because the Lux can take a full battery. However, I didn't realize that the Lux only has 5 volt out. And my FPV system, my Foxeer camera at the front and my Eachine 200 milliwatt transmitter at the back, both require more than 5 volts to run properly. So because of that, I ended up having to insert a PDB into my stack simply to run the 12 volts power for the FPV system. That's all I'm using that for. Now, other than the minor issue with the Lux board having the 5 volt limits there, I don't know about the version 2, but this version 1 has the 5 volt limitation. That's the only downside. This thing is so easy to solder because it's got tabs. It's not those little tiny pins that you have to get your wire through like a NAS 32 or an SPF 3 like you would see here. This Lux board I can't show you because it's buried in the stack, but it has tabs on the side that are so easy to solder, not only the first time, but more importantly, if you've got to pull something out, it's really easy to unsolder and resolder something in. So quite happy with the Lux boards. I'll be using more of those in the future. That's the overall components that are in here. The last thing I'll comment on is should you have a 180? Does it matter? Is it worth having in your quiver? And for me, the answer is yes, and here's my justification. When you look at different flying circumstances, if I'm going to be flying around my yard or outside of my house, zipping through the porch, things like that, I go with this little 130 frame Taro. You know, something in a 100 millimeter to 130 millimeter, maybe even 150. It's kind of fun for really close proximity, flying around a yard, something like that. The big boy, the 5-inch 4S copter, is great when you've got space. When I've got, full football field to fly in. And again, this is my flying ability factored in as well, but I don't feel comfortable with this powerful 2600 kV 4S quad in tight spaces yet. So this is when I really want to rip and I have a big open space to do so. Now this 180 seems to fall somewhere in the middle, which I've found so far is nice to fly in small parks. If you have an acre, a bunch of trees, something tight, a relaxing, fun little flyer like this that is very agile works really well in that circumstance. Again, it's a very different flying experience from the larger quad, but it's a lot of fun for me. So if you're in a circumstance where you're looking for an excuse to get another quad, which I always am, this might be a good choice for you if you want to slow down a little bit, have a relaxing flight, or perhaps have some confined areas that you need to be a little bit more agile around. So hopefully this has been helpful for everyone. We'll see you up in the air and keep flying.